John, we're live, and
We're
we're talking
live.
about and we're talking about something that I'm really passionate about, which is just this notion of um, do we really need to have a meeting?
Mm, mm. Yeah, well, I'd say in most cases the answer is no. Most people don't realize it. But all jokes aside, we've all been on the receiving side of another meeting invite, and there's something interesting about how easy it is to press the yes button, and it's also easy to
Hmm.
just put a meeting on people's calendars. And I think
And we
that
call it carpet bombing people's calendars.
yeah. And meetings are important to get work done, but a lot of times uh, people don't put prep work in.
Mm.
And when you do prep work, you'll either prepare a really good meeting that is worthy of people's time, or you'll realize in preparation, oh wait, this could have just been another form of communication. I think about that meme that when COVID started, that got very popular. That was like, we're all soon going to realize all of our meetings could have been emails, and
Yeah.
it kind of went viral. And we laughed at that. Both of us laughed at that. But then in our upcoming book, Magical Meetings, we've thought about actually dissecting that and making sense of what concepts would have been better as an email. And we have a meeting can be a few things as far as you and I see it. It can be informative, it can be explorative, it can be decisive, it can be a few other things. If your meeting is purely informative, then it shouldn't be a meeting. It could have been
Hmm.
a write-up, a video, a Loom video, if you've heard of that tool. You could have created a SlideShare deck and shared that with people. And informative isn't bad. And I like when you and I have talked about this, where your meeting can be generative and decisive, meaning we're going to generate ideas and make decisions on them. Well, by nature, that's going to also be informative,
Yeah.
but informative is a tertiary or secondary.
I think there's some nuance there too, because some people might hear it and think, well, I don't. They might struggle with it, and I think if you're truly, truly engaging the room and gathering real-time feedback based on what you're sharing, then it can be that informative stuff can be valuable because you're maybe adapting in real time based on what you're hearing, or maybe you're really getting live feedback and trying to integrate it in a bit. But when it's purely a status update, I think it's problematic. And I think a lot of the meeting software out there is just exacerbating this problem because it's a lot of that stuff is designed to, like, let's list the topics. Let's make an agenda that's nothing but a bunch of topics, and then let's collect a bunch of action items. And so, what are the things we're going to share, and then what are the things we're going to go do after the meeting? And and it just makes it easy for people to have these meetings they just shouldn't have.
Yes, and I think about, this was last week, and I was doing a feedback portion of a workshop, and one of the participants had the most top voted sticky of the group, and he simply put on the sticky, and it speaks for itself. He said, now all of our meetings can become workshops. And I thought that summarized this whole point, is that if your meeting is more of a workshop, meaning you've replaced the word to workshop, it's clear you're going to do some work in the meeting. Therefore, you should have the meeting, because it's going to be hard for that team to do that collective work together. Whereas I think meetings kind of have a negative connotation with them, where they are just status updates. And those are the ones where we end up on our phones or we're tapping our feet and not really present. Whereas in a workshop, it's much easier to be present because there's work to do. You're going to contribute. And so people listening, I would say, try out next week calling your meetings workshops, because then you're going to obviously have to do some kind of work in it, whether that's generate ideas, make a decision, review some material, and it'll feel more like, oh, we needed to have this, versus, wait, this could have just been a Slack update or posted on our communication board. And I just like that participant was thinking ahead. I didn't even need to pontificate any further. he sort of summarized the wisdom that we're talking about in
Yeah.
one sticky.
So good, and I think the key there is to think about our language, because we use this word meeting. You look at like the Eskimos, right? Like how many words do they have for ice and snow? And because they've got a lot of it, and there's a lot of nuance. And think about corporate America. We have as many meetings as they have snow, but we have one word meeting, whether it's 2 people or 1,000 people, or we're here to review a prototype, or we're going to put together a quarterly plan. It's like, I'm just going to throw a meeting on the calendar. Instead, if we think about our taxonomy and get really clear on our purpose and name the meeting well, then it's much easier to decide if we should have it. Because if you do that and you realize, whoa, oh, maybe we aren't really doing anything.
Yeah, that's a good point, Douglas. And that, an advanced detail there is, okay, let's say next week you call all of your meetings, workshops, and you start thinking about what you're going to do. I think there's another contrarian principle here to be noted. And that is, if you don't have a clear role or job for each participant to contribute something, one of them is going to feel like we shouldn't have had this meeting. And that's, you want to get 100% coverage there of at least, I mean, you can't prevent someone who just maybe is having a bad day and they don't want to be there. You can't really control that, but you can at least control saying each one of you is going to contribute in some way. Here's the job, here's the activities. Again, now this is, as I'm saying it sounds more like a workshop than a meeting. So
Yeah.
I think doing that pre-work is not only going to help you structure a better meeting, just like when you and I co-create agendas, but it's exciting when you can kick off the gathering and say, hey, all of you are going to contribute in this way. You're going to have an opportunity to express yourself. And this is essential for us to move forward. And then again, I think it feels less like a meeting and more like a work session that was collaborative and structured.
So, John, let's talk a little bit about how to influence meetings as a participant. We've been talking about
such a good topic.
Yeah, I know. It's like so easy to look at workshops and meetings and think, it's someone else's meeting and they should be responsible for the prep. And, maybe that is the case, but there's so much opportunity to move things toward the right direction, even as a participant. But we have to walk a fine line between usurping control and making them feel uncomfortable versus being helpful.
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind, if you are a participant and you're noticing that the meeting could change in some way to make it better, I think questions are one of the most approachable methods. Facilitators are looking for questions, right? We want to know how we can make things easier, hence facilitate. And so just by asking a question, it comes more across as curiosity and less as critique. And you can really assist in sort of a like black belt Jedi way by asking a good question. One of my favorites is, let's say you're the facilitator and I'm participating, and I've noticed that a few people seem confused or agitated. I might say, hey, Douglas, can I ask a question? And you say, sure. I'm like, my understanding, this activity that we're doing now is this. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. Can you remind me why it's important that we're doing this exercise and where it's leading to? Oh, yeah, John, I'd be happy to tell you. Because sometimes people didn't read your email to all of us telling us what we're going to do. They didn't read the details in the calendar and invite, and they weren't even paying attention at the beginning of the meeting. So a participant can ask a question and get those reminders to get everyone back on the same page. And that's one example of a question, but you could ask many others. Do you have any other ideas when you've been a participant, especially as a skilled facilitator, of ways to contribute?
Yeah, I think just one thing is like remembering one of our biggest ground rules that we like to communicate at the beginning of workshops, which is silence denotes agreement. And we need to make sure that we as participants understand the impact of the things we don't say. And if we notice that others aren't speaking up, and the facilitator isn't noticing that, how do we help them speak up, in a safe way? So definitely don't want to call someone out if we think they're uncomfortable speaking up. But and it could be a matter of even speaking with them during a break and encouraging them to speak up and giving them the confidence. So it's not only what's happening in the meeting, but what are you doing surrounding the meeting to be a great participant and to support the facilitator?
Speaking of surrounding, this might be a bit controversial, but I think when you are invited to an event, it's usually days out, sometimes weeks out. And if the facilitator didn't do what we see as important, which is, hey, set context, this is why we're having it, this is the purpose, this is why you were chosen, this is what we're going to do. If you just send me an invite and it's not clear, by the title isn't clear to me what's happening, or the description doesn't have that context, I can reply to you and I can sort of private channel, back channel and say, hey, I appreciate you inviting me, but I'm not seeing the value of this meeting. And that's a great moment for feedback for you of saying, maybe you just forgot to provide those details, or you need to think them through ahead of, and so you could actually be an awesome participant ahead of the meeting just by, accepting an invite and then maybe responding. And I've done that a few times, and it's been helpful for that facilitator. So it can start before the actual gathering, that you're influencing a better gathering or meeting.
I love that one. Another one that comes to mind is, thinking about your altitude. And I think a lot of meeting and even team dynamics and confrontations on projects happen when people are flying at different altitudes, and they're kind of like just floating past each other. And then they're doing everything they can to get a line and to understand each other, and getting frustrated because it's like, wait, what? Why are you talking? It's just, it will never synchronize because they're talking around the problem at different altitudes. And what I mean by that is, someone might be thinking in tactics, someone else might be thinking in strategy, and if that's happening, it's important to bring attention to it. And to your point, just like if it's someone might be unclear on why we're together, and you as a participant just raise that question, that's another great question you can raise. Like, are we dealing with strategy or tactics here? And or you can get more specific than that, right?
Yeah, and that's again an example of a great question. And I think the more you practice it as a participant, obviously the more you train that muscle, and you'll get more confident in other gatherings that you can influence. But I think a participant sometimes has more influence than the facilitator, because think about ratio. There's more participants usually than there are facilitators. And so one speaking up kind of speaks for everyone, and brings up a really important point that the facilitator, he or she may just be completely oblivious to at the moment. And so you're actually a gift to the facilitator when you see something that needs to be addressed or discussed.
100%. And sometimes things happen in the blink of an eye, and the facilitator might be writing something on the board and miss it, but you see it. And if you can call attention to those things, it can be really helpful to the facilitator. So absolutely, it's like, no matter how incredible the facilitator may be, the meeting will not be successful without input of the participants. Room intelligence is crucial. So you have power as a participant, and it's important to realize that, and you wield it with grace.
Yeah. And, here's a master of words. We have Jay, quote, understand the attitudes of the different altitudes. That sounds like a good 90s hip hop line, Jay.
With that, I think we might sign off.
Yeah.
I think we'll just leave you with the mic drop from our good community member. Love our community members. We have a community of facilitators. You should join us. Jay Shu is one of them. And good night.
Good night. Peace out. Altitudes and attitudes.